Hey guys, Kevin is for Fargo, Season 2, Episode 3, The Myth of Sisyphus, and I was definitely looking forward to this episode, obviously. They've really been on a roll, well, at least these first two episodes have, and this was another great episode. I mean, I'm not surprised, obviously. As I said, it's really been fantastic, and this was probably the best of the three, in my opinion, at least. I thought this was definitely the best of the three. They've really got more into the Gerhardts in this episode. I think that was probably the story that we focused the most on. Not that we haven't focused on that, but I think the Gus storyline was in this episode, but the Gearhearts was the main focus, and I definitely really love that. And I thought this episode was definitely very well done. It actually had some really dramatic and crazy moments. So a lot of crazy shit happened in this episode, but let's just get into it. Great episode, and this show is just proving to be fantastic. Just as fantastic as it goes on. So we start with a shot of Hansy, and he's in the middle of the snowy woods, and he's petting a white rabbit, and it's a very strange scene. It's kind of funny. It's the perfect example of the dark humor the show has, and you can tell right away he's not planning to keep this thing as a pet. He's obviously gonna kill it, and that's not a shock because of what we've seen from this show. And then once again, we see, once again, we basically see the montage of like, which I like that they're doing this. I like the way they open every episode with sort of like a montage of what everyone is doing at that exact time. It's really cool. We see like Lou and his family, they're eating breakfast. Peggy's getting ready to go to work. While Ed lies in bed, probably just not really knowing what to do, trying to protect himself. Lou heads off to work. I mean, just it was a good way to show everyone's morning routine. I mean, morning routine can really show who a person is, and I think they did a very good job with showing that. Hank is just sitting at his desk trying to figure out what's going on there, and I definitely really love that. I thought that was a great way to start the episode, and I really love how they start, like I said, with montages. It's kind of like a good way to do, like, opening credits without actually doing opening credits. I definitely like that, and the way that Fargo's able to get away with that, I definitely really love. The split screen, I've said before, but it's something I'm definitely really loving, and they're utilizing very well in the show, and, definitely one of my favorite parts of the show this season is the split screen, because that's something that the first season didn't have. They didn't have the split screen, and that's something that they're definitely utilizing very well. I mean, I didn't tell you guys this, I don't know if I said this, but you can definitely tell this season that the budget is a lot higher. You can definitely tell they have a bigger budget. Not to say they did in the first season, but I feel like they have even bigger budget now. They can do a lot more technical stuff. They're doing a lot more with action in general. They're just doing a lot more with everything. And I really feel that's why this story is just bigger, because they have a bigger budget. I don't know if they had a smaller budget, but it just seems like they have a bigger budget this season. So we then go to the Gearhart's living room, and the family's having a sit down with a variety of area business partners, and the meeting is to let everyone know who's in charge and what's going on with the Kansas City Mafia. And of course, Bear is having a little snack, and he's eating an entire chicken, or a family of chickens or something. I mean, these Gearharts, they don't play around. And that seems to be what he does best. He just eats things. I mean, that's what's funny about his character, that he just eats dead animals. I mean, okay. And Dodd still doesn't want to sell to the mafia, but Floyd says that she's considering it. And Dodd seems worried that sell or no sell, they're all going to die. They're all dead meat, because they know how powerful the California gang is. They know how powerful their gang is, and they know that they're probably not going to stand a chance without Rye, and everyone in the room seems to be in it together. There's no sort that, and that's kind of what worries us, because that's them doing this together probably makes us think that they're probably going to die, and if some of these guys really do look like they're going to be killed. And something I think is very interesting is when we see when they talk about, of course, their father. I can't remember his name right now. Otto, I think his name was. Yeah, Otto. Floyd is convinced that Otto's going to wake up from his stroke. I don't think that's possible, but I think it's very interesting that we saw that. And Dodd, you can tell, still wants to be head of the family. He still wants to take Floyd's position. And I think that definitely is very interesting. Like I said, Dodd is probably going to be the person that Joe ends up recruiting, because they need someone to turn against the family. So Joe and Mike are meeting over breakfast. However, the two aren't there just to discuss hair products. They know about Rye and the judge, but his current whereabouts are still unknown. So obviously, most of this episode is them trying to find Rye, and they obviously don't know where he is, but they want to know, and that's what their main mission is in this episode, which I like seeing. So basically, back in Laverne, Minnesota, Lou is headed to Fargo when Hank radios in to tell him that the gun found in the snow outside the Waffle Hut has a fingerprint that matches Rye's. And if they want to double check, there's still maybe one of those rolling around the floor of Bud's butcher shop. And again, they don't know that Rye is dead. They don't know who the person is that did this. So they're definitely starting to put clues together. In this episode, just alone, I mean, it's a very fast pace. They are doing this in a slow pace way, but they definitely are starting to get clues, which I like seeing. I don't want this to drag out, and I like that they're starting to get clues. That's something I like seeing here. But obviously, he needs to head out to Fargo at some point because the show is called Fargo for a reason, to see, the goings on in Fargo. And for the rest of the episode, Lou is in Fargo. So he goes to Fargo and basically he sits down next to. And by the way, the thing with the gun, of course, they now know that the gun has fingerprints on it, and they're pretty sure that these are Rye's fingerprints. So eventually, Hank has to put two and two together at some point. I mean, he has to. He seems like he knows what he's doing. He seems like he can understand what's going on. I think it's pretty obvious. I mean, they have to at some point just figure out what's going on there. So in Fargo, Lou sits down next to fellow cop Ben, and basically, if that name sounds familiar, it's because it's actually his future self that goes on to become the commanding officer of Gus Grimley. And I thought that was interesting when we found that out. I didn't know that, but I had to look that up. I thought that was interesting when we found that out, that Ben Schmidt was actually the commanding officer of Gus. Again, this is basically a prequel to seeing, the Gus that we get in Fargo, how in season one, how he came to be. And I like that we're seeing small characters like that. It's something I definitely like seeing. Definitely makes me wonder if we're gonna see Bill. If you remember Bill, that was the person that worked with that worked with Molly, the older guy. I think maybe we're gonna see him. I'm not really sure, but I'm just wondering if we are. So the two talk about the scene at the Waffle Hut and the prints on the gun, and Ben then gives a brief lesson in Gerhardt family history, because he wants him to know how dangerous these Gerhardts are, and he tells him, "Look, be prepared. These Gerhardts, they're very tough. They could come after you, and they're very hard to beat." And Lou continues to poke around, asking whether or not Ben is familiar with Mike or the Kitchen Brothers, and he doesn't seem to be very familiar. He seems to know what he's talking about here. So basically, he says that when you put a dead judge, the Gerhardt family, and some hitters from Kansas City in a bag together, he goes back to thinking it might be best just to confess to the crime himself and go for the long life in a cell somewhere with hot and cold running water. In other words, none of these people are people you want to be messing with. So he's basically telling him, look, this is a city that is infested with crime. It's very dangerous, and you're probably going to be in serious shit, and you should know that. So I like the way that he warned about that. Obviously, it's something that he should know. We know the city is crime infested, and that's something that Lou should probably know because the city is infested with crime. It really is, and that's pretty crazy. So I like that we saw that, but I do, I think he's also trying to say that someone's eventually going to confess. Someone's eventually going to confess to what's going on because of obviously someone being scared, and I think it definitely is going to be very interesting what he's saying there. So at Hansy's place, Rabbit is on, and I'm wondering if maybe Ben knows maybe what's going on. I mean, I kind of feel like Ben might actually know more of what's going on than we think he does. So at Hansy's place, Rabbit's on the menu, or at least at the kitchen counter, and he's talking to Simone Gerhardt about Rye's whereabouts, and if Constance thought Peggy was a bad girl, she really needs to meet Simone, because Simone is even worse than Peggy, really, she is. I mean, Simone is the definition, I think, of Uma Thurman in Pulp Fiction. That was the vibe I was getting from, was Uma Thurman in Pulp Fiction, and that was pretty awesome that we saw that. I definitely like seeing Simone in this episode. So Peggy's at work listening to Betsy talking about losing her hair from the chemo, and they talk about how she might not have to lose her hair because Peggy's had someone that went through that before and they didn't lose their hair, so Peggy's thinking that might not happen to her. Um, Again, it's really sad what Betsy's going through. I do feel bad for her, but I like that we keep getting little updates here and there on what's going on with her. It's something that's very interesting. And the topic quickly switches, and like I said, something I do like is that they're not focusing on it 100%. They're not making it extremely sad because we have other things to get through. We can't focus on Betsy having this cancer because we know she's going to die. It's that simple. We know she's not going to make it, so that's why it's so sad. So the topic quickly switches to the whole lifespan thing, and Hank interrupts with a wanted sign with Rye's face on it, and Hank is definitely starting to think that Rye is the person that, started the shootouts, and Peggy instantly recognized the man on the poster, and of course she does, because, she was the one that, of course, killed him. She spent an entire car ride staring at his face, and, Betsy mentions the shoe, and Peggy does whatever she can when she hears that shoe. the look on Peggy's face is just priceless. I mean, you can just tell that Peggy is doing whatever she can to make it be like, oh, no, 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 you shouldn't worry about this, because Betsy's starting to think maybe the shoe is connected to the murder, obviously. That's what she's thinking about, that the shoe in the tree they found is connected to the murder, and that she should think about it. And Peggy sweeps away with a sick look on her face, and just as Cons looks like she's going to mention the gaping hole she saw in the Bloomquist car, Peggy then throws a wrench into Betsy's story, which Hank buys into, and she pretty much says that there's no way this could be true, that, Betsy shouldn't talk about what's going on. And Constance, definitely, you can tell, is on to Peggy. Like I said, she can tell there's something going on. I mean, they wouldn't just have a random hole in their car for no reason. Constance is eventually going to catch on, and that she's going to be the demise of Peggy, unfortunately. I mean, I want Peggy and Ed to get out of this, obviously, because, this was just an accidental thing. They did murder Rye because they had to, but I do want, obviously, them to get out of this. So Hank says that he's inclined to agree with Peggy. It's not just like you're going, and he says it's not like you're just going to drive home with with Gerhardt in your windshield and start supper, and that's exactly what they did. I mean, that's the funny thing about it is that is exactly what they did. I mean, they served Rye as meat, if you remember. That's exactly what they did there. So Peggy shows up at Bud's butcher shop to tell Ed about Betsy's theory and that they're in danger, basically. And basically, the two pass Rye's picture in the window. Ed freezes up, most likely because he now knows the name of the victim, and that makes him even more worried because obviously he served meat, and now it's even more messed up. I think Ed's just thinking this is really messed up, and like I said, Ed really is the Lester of this season, while Peggy definitely is like the Lorne, the like after Lester. So he also now knows the name of his victim, or maybe just the family name. So he obviously really knows that, he now knows stuff about the person he just served for dinner, and he doesn't want to know about that, which I thought was pretty funny. So Lou's still waiting in Fargo when he sees Skip spraying the typewriter guy, and Lou and Ben follow him outside, start questioning him. Skip talks up typewriters, his business at the courthouse, and spaceships, and it's a quick mention, but again, it's there. We keep hearing about these UFOs, and I don't know if that's going to be an actual thing, but they keep talking about it, so it has to connect somehow. I mean, if you remember in the first episode, they thought, Rye thought he saw a UFO in this guy. He might not have been crazy. It might actually be there for all we know. I mean, maybe it wouldn't make sense, but that's kind of like the nature of the show. A lot of things in the show don't really go with it, and that's why it works so well, because it just knows dry humor, it knows dark humor, it knows when to put humor in there, and I think something like that would work very well in the show, definitely, and I think that'd be very funny, actually, if that happened. So he's rambling so much that the two contemplate taking him in. They're thinking that maybe this guy could be innocent, and Ben's opting to let him go. But again, he's acting very suspicious. So I don't know if Skip knows what's going on. He does know what's going on, of course, because Skip was the guy that they tortured last week. Put his tie in the typewriter. So obviously he's probably just terrified of the crime, and he doesn't know if Lou and Ben are going to do the same thing to him. That's why he's obviously rambling, because he doesn't know if the same thing's going to happen to him here, and that they obviously don't know about that. But they're definitely on to him. You can just tell they are. So he actually does go, though. He goes off to Rye's apartment, and instead of Rye, he finds Simone and Hansy, and she identifies him as the guy that Rye's doing business with, but Skip says he's just there to pay off gambling debts, and of course, he doesn't have any money, so she grabs him by the tie, and people like to grab this guy by the tie. Seriously, I don't know what it is, but they like to grab him by the tie, and that scares him. I mean, I can understand that's obviously a good torture method, but I find it pretty funny that last week he was getting grabbed by the tie by Gerhardt, and now he's getting grabbed by the tie by some girl he doesn't even know, and says they should go for a drive and have some fun. And I thought that was pretty funny the way she said that. She's like, we should go have some fun, and honestly, just don't wear ties. Seriously, just don't wear ties. And I think Skip's gonna be okay, because Skip's probably gonna die in this season, like getting strangled by a tie. I mean, that'd actually be pretty funny. Honestly, they should do that. Skip should die in this show, just getting strangled by his own tie, because he keeps getting tortured by ties. Why not just kill him, strangling him by his own tie? That'd be really funny if that happened. I know it'd be dark, but that goes with the show. I mean, they made fun of a guy with no ears. What do you think? That could be really funny if they did that. I definitely like that. So I like that recurring joke, and I think Skip's gonna be a really fun character. So Ed and Peggy drive out their car to a deserted area with the hole still in the windshield, and it doesn't seem, and of course that it's not too suspicious or anything. I mean, it's still there. The plan is to just crash the car because, people obviously are suspecting about the hole in the windshield, so they're just going to crash it, file insurance claim, and put the whole thing behind them. And they're going to just pretend that, the car was crashed, and that's exactly what they decide to do. They crash the car, and Ed, basically crashes the car, and that's what happens there, which I thought was very interesting the way they did that. So basically, they file an insurance claim, and I don't think this is going to go as well as they think it's going to, but it's a good plan. But it definitely is not going to go as well. I mean, we know how dangerous this could be, and I don't think it's going to go as well as they think. So at the Gerhardt house, Bear tells Charlie that Floyd is still looking to sell a piece of the business to the Kansas City Mafia, and obviously that's the gang that they're worried about, and he wants Charlie to go back to school, but his son wants him to stay and help, and Bear says that it's not negotiable. Just to get the point across, he points a turkey leg at him, and again, every time he gets hungry, every time, Bear gets hungry, he has to, it's pretty funny. I mean, every time, there's food, it's bears on the screen. I think it's pretty funny the way we saw that. Um, but obviously Floyd wants to sell this business, and the person to sell the business to, they're going to sell it to the Kansas City Mafia. The way they're going to do that, I'm thinking they're going to recruit Floyd. Obviously, they want Rye, but again, Dodd wants to take over, and you still see that power struggle there. So that can change in any second, though, because Lou and Ben then arrive at the Gearhart house looking for answers, and if that doesn't put it on your stomach, I don't know what will. I mean, this scene was just as intense as when Lou went to see Ed last week. That anything could happen here. It was pretty crazy. So you knew they were going to live, but you know how powerful the Gearharts are, and you know what they can do, that it really was actually pretty intense. Floyd comes out, recognizes Ben, he introduces Lou, says they need to talk about the incident at the Waffle Hut, and just as Lou is throwing around a few threats, Dodd drives up with a few of his own. However, when Lou throws out the name Mike Maligan, Floyd looks very worried. Obviously, she doesn't want to hear that name. She knows who Mike Maligan is. She knows he's working with Joe, and that concerns her. So Dodd, of course, never bats an eye. He doesn't really have much to say about it because he doesn't know what's going on. Charlie interrupts the staring contest with news that Hansy needs Dodd, and conversation is cut off for now. So basically, Hansy wants to recruit Dodd, and Hansy wants to work with Dodd. So I think that's very interesting that Hansy wants to work with Dodd. But basically, that's what happens with that. And again, I like how Lou is starting to question the Gearharts, because obviously it would make sense if, Rye's fingerprints match the gun, then the Gearharts should know what's going on. He doesn't know that the Gearharts weren't with Rye. And the thing is with Lou, he's probably not going to believe them very much because, of course, the warning that Ben gave him. He said, you can't trust these Gearharts, you can't trust anything they say. So Lou is probably not going to trust their word. If they say we had nothing to do with this, he's not going to believe them, and I really feel that one of them is going to be unjustly accused of something that they obviously didn't do. And again, it's not necessarily their fault, it's the fact that Rye's dead, so there's no other person, eventually I think Lou's going to find a suspect that's not really that suspect. It's bound to happen at some point. So Ben drops Lou off at Carriage Typewriters. Carriage Typewriters. Inside he finds Mike Milligan and the Kitchen Brothers. All four of them are looking for Skip. Three with guns drawn, and this scene was very Pulp Fiction-esque, definitely. I keep seeing those Pulp Fiction comparisons, and I love that. They're looking for Skip. Three guys with guns drawn. Again, everyone's looking for Skip, seriously. Mike brings up his meeting with Hank from the day before. The bad guys leave. Lou heads home, and Lou stops to get gas, and a random guy at the gas station rambles on about aliens. He says there are strange happenings occurring there near, and again, there's something going on with these aliens. We don't really know what it's about. There's a really great scene of Peggy and Ed on I think it was either a plane or a bus. They're definitely going away. We don't know where they're going, but they're definitely going away, and it seems what's going on here is that, it seems what's going on with this is that they're just going over the plan, making sure everything worked out well. I thought that was definitely pretty funny the way we saw that. But when Lou gets home, Hank is there, and they talk about Lou's favorite topic of the day, Mike Milligan and the Kitchen Brothers. Obviously, they know that there's something going on with them. They don't know much of what's happening there, but they know that it's obviously a very dangerous situation. So later that night, Dodd meets up with Simone and Hansy. After smacking her around a bit, he tries to, and this scene was legitimately disturbing, I will say that. This scene was quite intense. He tries to choke Rye's whereabouts out of Skip. Hansy tells Skip to get into the hole that's shaped like a grave. Despite his groveling, they bury him with gravel, and they're not going to listen to Skip. I knew Skip would die. Now, I was thinking that Skip was going to die by getting choked by a tie, but That's not what happened. Skip is buried with gravel, and I thought that was pretty crazy the way we saw it. I mean, just the fact they buried him. I mean, he wasn't giving them the answers that they wanted, and you can just it just shows how determined Dot is to find his brother, which I really like seeing. I mean, yes, this is a fun show, but it's not afraid to be really serious. And that was a really serious scene. I mean, it really shows how Dodd is determined to find his brother and how he's willing to do some things that are probably very just, out of the box to find his brother and do some things that probably are very outrageous, but to him it's just, if I find my brother, if I can find my brother this way, then cool. That's what he cares about. And I think definitely is going to be very interesting when everyone finds out about Rye. Definitely, that's going to be interesting what happens there. We do see, though, I like with Skip that they left a little scrap of his tie left sticking out of the ground. But the thing is, now someone's going to find out that Skip was buried alive because the little tie is there. They're going to know it's Skip. Obviously, who else had the tie? Who else was staying with the tie? They're going to know it's him at some point. So definitely, Lou is going to have another murder to solve, which I think is interesting. And I definitely want to know. I think we're definitely going to get to a point very soon where everyone's going to start to find out what happened to Rye. At some point, they're going to find out. I don't know when, but I think we're getting to that point very soon. And I don't know when we're getting to that, but I definitely feel like that's coming up very soon. I just feel like that's happening very soon. Let's talk about this whole situation with the Gearharts. Is Hansy really going? Obviously, Hansy is working with Dodd, but what's going on with Floyd? Because Floyd is convinced that Otto's gonna wake up and that she's only doing this temporarily. And I don't think Floyd knows really what she's dealing with. Obviously, Floyd seems very capable. She seems very capable of taking over the business, but right now, at least, it seems like she is very much in this position where she thinks, this is temporary, and it's really not temporary. Definitely, it's not temporary. You can just tell it's not temporary. Peggy and Ed, is their plan really going to work? I don't know. I mean, their car being crashed, I don't really know if this is the best executed plan. But I think at this point, they're just doing whatever they can to survive and making it seem as innocent as possible. But I don't know if this is really going to work. I don't know if Peggy thought this as well through as she thought she did. I think Peggy is capable, and I think she's good at, making plans, but I don't think this was the most executed plan. I really don't think it was. We'll have to see what happens with that. I'm interested in seeing who the first person is going to be that finds out that Rye's dead. Obviously, Peggy and Ed know, but other than them, who's going to find out? Someone needs to find out at some point. That's going to be interesting to see what happens with that. Um, I like meeting Ben. I like the character of Ben because, of course, he goes on to become the commanding officer of Gus, and I think his character is going to be very interesting in the show. Just seeing the interactions between Lou and Ben, I'm looking forward to that, definitely. Their characters are going to be really great. I really do like their characters, I have to say. Definitely, they're something that I like seeing. The joke with Skip is just great. But we now have our first, like, really big death. Of course, we had our first big death in the first episode, but other than the first episode, we haven't really had a big death, and now we do have a big death. So that's going to be interesting to see what happens with that. And the Kansas City Mafia. It seems like the Gearharts are really worried about the Kansas City Mafia. They don't think they're going to survive. And you can tell how brutal they are. I mean, obviously, if they torture someone like Skip just to get answers, who knows what they're going to do to the Gearharts? I mean, we don't really know what the Kansas City Mafia's plan is. We don't really know what they want to do. We just know that they're very tough, and we know how powerful they are. And obviously, when the Gearharts are terrified, we should be terrified. I think that really is what that's trying to show, that they're that bad that the Gearharts are terrified, and that obviously means that they're a really bad bunch of people. So, definitely, it's gonna be very interesting to see how they get out of that. But overall, guys, amazing episode. I think this was the best episode so far. Let me know what you guys saw this episode. I absolutely loved it, and I will see you guys in my next video, which will be for tonight's episode of Awkward. And I will see you guys. Actually, no. It will be for Homeland. No, I have not reviewed Homeland. That will be coming to you tomorrow morning, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.